When do you use wenn in German? They may sound alike, but not all whens in English translate as wenn in German. This can be a source of common mistakes, so today we will be troubleshooting how to say when in German correctly. So, know when to say wenn, or wann, or als, or ob. In English, we can use the word when to mean a variety of things. The time at which something is happening, when the train arrives, a repeated event, whenever I go to the movies, I always eat popcorn, a conditional situation, if or when I do this, then something else happens. And so at times it can be difficult to know which word to use in German for when and if, since in German these can be wenn, wann, als, or ob. The purpose of this video is to explain some important distinctions so that you are communicating what you mean to be, can avoid confusion and misunderstandings, and help troubleshoot instances where English speakers may get into trouble speaking German. The first when we'll talk about is probably the first word you learned in German to mean when. It's the question word wann. Note its spelling with an A. It is used for direct or indirect questions asking about a point in time. If you could have this information written on your calendar, or would need to look at a clock or a calendar, you are dealing with wann. Wann means when you're referring to time on a clock or a calendar. So for example, when are you coming to Kassel? This is a direct question asking information about an arrival time. So when are you coming to Kassel? Wann kommen Sie nach Kassel? Now you try it. When is the train arriving in Berlin? Remember, when is wann when you're referring to time on a clock or on a calendar. So ask yourself, would I need to consult a watch, calendar, or schedule of some kind? If so, use wann and watch your spelling to make sure you spell it with an A. So how could you translate that question? Wann kommt der Zug in Berlin an? So wann kommt der Zug in Berlin an is asking a direct question about a time. But wann isn't just for direct questions, that is, questions that you directly ask someone. It's also for indirect questions where you're talking about time. What if you asked me the last example question and I didn't know the answer to it? I could say, I don't know when the train arrives. This when is still referring to a specific time on a clock or a calendar, so even though it is incorporated into a sentence reply, it is still wann, because it refers to a point in time. So how would you say in German, I don't know when the train arrives? Ich weiß nicht, wann der Zug ankommt. So you're already noticing that when in English isn't always then in German. Here's another instance. When I was a child. The temptation is to translate this with the German word that sounds most like English, wenn, meaning when. But that doesn't work when you're talking about something that happened one time in the past. It is a single specific event that wasn't repeated. You have to use als to refer to single events in the past. So als is for single events one time in the past. So, als ich Kind war, not wenn. Here's an example of that sentence completed. Als ich Kind war, konnte ich den ganzen Tag spielen. When I was a child, I could play all day. As much as we may want to sometimes, we can't go back and be a child again, and so this is a classic example of an unrepeatable event in the past. Als connects two individual real, actual events that happened in the past. Now you try it. When I visited Germany the first time. Remember, als is when for one time in the past, unrepeatable. So ask yourself, did this happen one time in the past? Yes, it was the first time you went, and so it can never be your first time again. And so you can't use wenn, as tempting as that is, just because it sounds like the word in English. Can the event of going to Germany be repeated? Of course. We hope you go to Germany or other German-speaking countries often. But what you're expressing here is that one time in the past you went to Germany for the first time. So how would you say this in German? Als ich das erste Mal Deutschland besuchte. Now, how would you complete that sentence so that it makes sense? Remember that als connects two individual, real, actual events that happened in the past. So you can pause the video here and finish the sentence for yourself with an actual event. Now here's an example of that sentence completed. Als ich das erste Mal Deutschland besuchte, hatte ich viele Fragen. So when do you use wenn? If you mean, whenever I go to Germany, then it's a repeatable or repeated event, and that brings us to the word wenn. Wenn connects two events that belong together but aren't a single specific event. So use wenn when you mean whenever. For example, whenever I visit Germany, wenn ich Deutschland besuche, and then you can complete the sentence. For example, wenn ich Deutschland besuche, bringe ich oft Geschenke mit. Meaning, whenever I visit Germany, I often bring presents. It's clear that these two events are related to each other, but aren't one specific time or event. I bring presents whenever I go to Germany. Now you try it. When I go to the movies. Remember, whenever is for repeatable or repeated events. Ask yourself, are you talking about this one specific time when you saw a movie? No, that would be als. Are you talking about an event that you do more than once? Yes, whenever I go to the movies, I buy popcorn, for example. So if you can substitute in the word whenever for when, then you know you are dealing with wenn in German. So how would you say this in German? Wenn ich ins Kino gehe. Now, how could you complete this sentence so that it makes sense? Wenn connects two events that belong together but aren't a single specific event. So you can pause the video here and finish the sentence for yourself with related repeatable action. Wenn ich ins Kino gehe, kaufe ich immer Popcorn. Whenever I go to the movies, or when I go to the movies, I always buy popcorn. Wenn also very frequently has the meaning of if. Use wenn if you mean if. So, if she invites me to the movies, would be, wenn sie mich ins Kino einlädt. So you also use when you mean if, or something conditional, that depends on certain conditions. If she invites me to the movies, then something will happen. Here's an example of that sentence completed. Wenn sie mich ins Kino einlädt, gehe ich gerne mit. If she invites me to the movies, I will gladly go. It's clear that these two events are related to each other, but aren't one specific time or event, and also that one depends on the other. These are also known as if-then statements. Ask yourself, are you making a statement that depends on the other part of the sentence? This is when the when means then. Yes, if or when I am tired, then I'm going to do something related to being tired. It's a classic if-then statement. So how would you say this in German? Wenn ich müde bin. Now how could you complete that sentence so that it makes sense? Wenn connects two events that are related to one another, so you can pause the video here and finish the sentence for yourself with a related action that is about the condition of being tired. Now here's an example of that sentence completed. Wenn ich müde bin, schlafe ich. Logisch. Now here's another place people sometimes get confused. There's another instance when we say if in English, when we mean whether or not. This isn't the kind of weather that means the weather outside. So not this kind of weather. But rather whether or not we will do something or something will happen. So if you want to say if, but you can substitute in whether or not in English, you must use ob in German. Let's look at an example. I don't know if, whether or not, he's coming to the party. These two things aren't related to each other. My knowing has nothing to do with this person coming to the party. So this isn't the conditional if-then kind of if. So how could you say, I don't know if, whether or not, he's coming to the party? That's right. Ich weiß nicht, ob zur Party kommt. Now you try it. Do you know if, whether or not, the train is coming? Ask yourself, is this if conditional? Does my knowing depend on the train coming? No. So this isn't wenn. Could this if be replaced by whether or not? Yes. So this means I need to use ob here. Remember, ob means if or whether or not. So how would you say, do you know if the train is coming? You would say, wissen Sie, ob der Zug kommt? So, to recap, know when to say wenn. Use wenn if you mean if, as in if, then, the conditional. Use wenn whenever you mean whenever, if something is repeated. Otherwise, you're talking about wann, referring to time on a clock or a calendar. Use als when you mean when for one time in the past, not repeatable, and use ob when you mean if or whether or not. Wenn Sie möchten, können Sie sich das Video mehrmals ansehen, wann auch immer Sie wollen. Als ich es gemacht habe, habe ich gehofft, dass es Ihnen hilft. Ob das wirklich der Fall ist, möchte ich wissen. Also melden Sie sich bei mir, wenn Sie Feedback haben. Meine E-Mail-Adresse ist azim@hunter.cuny.edu.